9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
City Clerk, can you start with the preamble, please?
This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and council members while allowing for public participation. Accordingly, the public may observe city council meetings and/or address the council using remote public comment options or have the option to attend city council meetings in person. Please be advised that city council members may continue to participate in the meeting remotely. The council may take action on any item listed in the agenda. To address the council in person, the location is 50 Park Place, Brisbane, the community meeting room. Masks are no longer required but are highly recommended in accordance with California Department of Health guidelines. To maintain public health and safety, please do not attend in person if you're experiencing symptoms associated with COVID-19 or respiratory illness. To address the City Council on any item on or not on the agenda, fill out a request a speaker form located in the community meeting room lobby and submit it to the clerk. Remote participation. Members of the public may observe and participate in the City Council meeting by logging into the Zoom webinar listed. City Council meetings can also be viewed live and or on demand via the city's YouTube channel, youtube.com/BrisbaneCA, or on Comcast Channel 27. Archive videos can be replayed on the city's website, brisbaneca.org/meetings. Please be advised that if there are technological difficulties, the meeting will nevertheless continue. The agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting and at least 72 hours prior to a regular meeting. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Aside from commenting while in the Zoom webinar, the following email and text line will also be monitored during the meeting, and public comments received will be noted for the record during oral communications 1 and 2 or during an item. Email ipadilla@brisbaneca.org, text 628-219-2922. Join the Zoom webinar with the ID 991-9362-8666. The call-in number is 1-669-900-9128. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact the clerk at 415-508-2113. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. Thank you.
Welcome to the Brisbane City Council meeting of January 19th, 2023. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. The time is 7:33 p.m. and if you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, that would be great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Here.
Councilmember Lentz.
Here.
Councilmember Mackin.
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Here.
And Mayor Davis.
Here. Now we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a first and a second to adopt the agenda as it stands?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
And Mayor Davis.
Aye. We'll now move on to awards and presentation. First, we have a proclamation recognizing Lunar New Year, and I'll go ahead and read it now. Proclamation declaring Lunar New Year. Whereas the City of Brisbane joins families in Brisbane, Asia, and throughout the Asian diaspora in commemorating Lunar New Year, beginning January 22nd, 2023, and welcoming the Year of the Rabbit. And whereas Lunar New Year, predominantly celebrated by millions of Asian and Pacific Islander API Americans of Chinese, Korean, Singaporean, and Vietnamese descent, is a time of joy and renewal. On this special and auspicious day, families gather to celebrate the arrival of a new year of good health and prosperity. And whereas, as we look forward to a joyous new year, we proudly reflect on the contributions of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, from America's first transcontinental railroad to the farms and small businesses foundational to our economy. We also recognize the discriminatory laws, xenophobic policies, and mistreatment suffered by AAPI communities are a blight to our greater history. And whereas today we stand with Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in rejecting past prejudice and embracing inclusion, let us join our AAPI community members, neighbors, and friends in celebration. And whereas as the door to the Year of the Rabbit opens, we wish good fortune, health, and happiness to our AAPI community. And now, therefore, I, Madison Davis, Mayor of the City of Brisbane, do hereby proclaim January 20th, 2023 as the beginning of a fresh start to Lunar New Year. And here with us this evening, we have former Chair of the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee, William Locke, to accept the proclamation. Hi, William.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mayor Davis. Thank you so much for creating this proclamation for all the EAPS who live and work within Brisbane. It was a step in the right direction, especially with everything that's been going on in the last couple of years. And I am really proud of the City of Brisbane for acknowledging and appreciating its members. And as a member of the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accountability Committee, we really appreciate that because we've been working on a flag procedure, and this is a step in having the Lunar New Year, the Stand with Asians flag that the City of Brisbane is going to be flying very soon. So I'm really looking forward to that. And thank you again.
Well, thank you, William, and thank you for your contributions to the IDEA Committee. We really appreciate your presence and your work on that committee. With that, we can go ahead and move on to oral communications number 1. And I do have a slip here from Paul Buscal. So why don't you come up, Paul, and if you could wait for a second while our city clerk gets our timer ready. The time is 2 minutes. So hold on and okay, I'm getting the green light. Go ahead.
I'm here tonight with a request for the council. One is I'd like to know why we now have a 2-minute time limit for us to speak. Now it's down to 2, and 2 minutes sometimes doesn't give people enough time to paint the picture as to what it is they're trying to convey. Okay, and you especially are very strict with that time, and let people know it. And that's not okay. You know, you move on to the next person without any response. I know you're not supposed to debate. I know you're not supposed to make any decisions based on what somebody's saying, but it'd be nice to have a response from the council. Nobody responds when somebody comes in and says something. Okay, so maybe we can extend the amount of time that people speak, especially when we have all these people in the audience waiting to speak. That's number 1. So maybe we can look at more time to speak and maybe respond. The other thing is, all the things that have been said amongst the council, what's been said about Cliff, what was said about Anthony Walker. You know, you're reading proclamations for inclusiveness. This is exclusiveness. You guys have an exclusive group of people, everybody but Cliff, I'll say it, that feel as though you're entitled. You've even went as far as to say that we want to finish what we've started. I've been in Brisbane a long time, And a lot of things have been started and finished by a lot of members on the council. So the last thing I'd like to ask from the council, if I may, two things, very
Please wrap
quick.
up.
When I'm viewing this live, my face isn't on the viewing. It's a 2-minute timer that's being ticked down, right? Can we change that? Everybody doesn't see this timer because now I'm distracted looking, wow, this person only has 2 minutes to talk. Okay, that's one thing.
We can see you, Paul.
The last thing I have that I'd like to ask, a request.
We're beyond Paul, but
Okay,
you
if I
can come
may,
back to oral communications number 2.
you as the mayor also have the right to extend my time, don't
Please-
you?
I did say, please wrap up,
Okay, so
but
I'd
you
like to
can come
wrap up,
back.
I'd like to wrap up with the final request of the council. I would like to know if you could vote on having a term limit put on the ballot. Because I'm in the process of collecting signatures to put a term limit on the ballot. Like I did when you wanted to extend your terms. We got enough signatures to put it on the ballot. So if you
Thank
could do
you.
that for this community, I would appreciate it. So I wouldn't have to go out and collect signatures with other members of this community.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
I believe maybe a refresher is warranted from the city attorney for a member of the public regarding the council responding. It's my understanding that items that are not agendized, the council is not allowed to address. So anything that's brought up under oral communications number 1 are items that are not on the agenda, and therefore the council is not able to respond to those items. Is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, it's essentially correct. There's little leeway for responding. Somebody makes a personal comment, somebody, the example I've used in the past is if somebody says, you've called me a liar, the council can come back and say, well, no, there's misunderstanding or whatever the facts are, but you can't end up in a dialogue because it's not an agendized item. If there's something to be addressed formally or in any detail, it belongs on the agenda, as you just referenced, Madam Mayor. May I ask one clarifying question? Ingrid, City Clerk, I see whoever's speaking on my screen. Is it just that the screen in the room has the timer up?
Because the public comment was made in the room, yes, the timer is on the lectern.
Okay,
But
good.
usually people do public comment like via Zoom. I have a timer on the screen.
So we don't see it because we're on the panel side?
Yes, I was testing the timer on the lectern, so that's what I used with Paul.
Okay, thank you. I was just confused because we weren't seeing it. And I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I think you also asked about the timing. And yes, the mayor has discretion to set the time. And as you and everybody else on the council has done in their terms as mayor, sometimes you exercise discretion to let people finish. Sometimes if they've come back or whatever, then you don't. So I've seen it both ways, but you do have discretion. The time frames are really up to the mayor. Nobody does less than 2 minutes. Some people do 2, 3. Those are the most common ones that I've seen.
Thank you.
All right, so if I may, just before we move on, so if I wanted to ask a question, Tom, I'm free to do that. If someone from the public says something, I can follow up with staff on a question, correct?
It really depends on what it's getting into. You can certainly say, are you aware of this, or are we looking into this? That type of question, absolutely. But you can't get into a back and forth with staff because it's not on the agenda.
Okay. I mean, I just, in the past, I mean, we've done that. We've even had people from the public, have questions and staff has responded to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just, so if I wanted to ask a question of staff, that's okay, correct? As long as it's not getting into a dialogue.
Yeah, I've really never heard. Well, I can't think of an example where the council members asked staff a question and ended up in a lengthy dialogue. I certainly have never had to caution against it.
Okay.
You know,
All
what
right.
we see that part of the perception is, and I think all the council members know this, but the best practice that is used up and down the state is absolutely no back and forth, period, full stop. And that's what members are told. And I just, you know, that's not exactly what the law is. There can be a little give and take, but not much.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Tom. You know, I've been on the council for 13 years. We kind of, you know, maybe kind of fudge those rules a little bit, you know, I mean, allowing people to talk and hear them out. You know, even taking, you know, information from the community and trying to get feedback from staff. And so, Clay, I just trying to get some clarification here. I know it's something that you just said, Tom, in regards to, you know, who sets the amount of time that people do speak. So that I guess that, you know, it has been the discretion of the mayor. But in the past, you know, we've talked about it as a council, like how long people should talk, and we've kind of left it kind of open, and that the mayor would try and cut someone off if they talked a really long time. So, you know, just kind of like a historical perspective.
Well, I think this probably is an illustration of why we don't want to have back and forth like this, because I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I'd be glad to come back to the next meeting and provide the history. But off the top of my head, I'm just not prepared.
Okay. No, that's fair. All right. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
No, hold on. Karen, go ahead.
I have asked this question of you, Tom, privately before, relative to the public feeling that they're not being acknowledged when they ask a question or make a statement. And you have told me specifically that it is really against all the laws of the state of California for us to respond respectfully to the speaker, because of the one fact that everything that is on our agenda is published for the public to understand what we're going to be talking about. So with all due respect to the speaker this evening, his topic is not on our agenda. And if we got into a discussion, then it would deprive the rest of the public of the information that is being shared via oral communications and not agendized. I just want to make sure that the message we get out to the public is really clear why we can't respond, even though we might want to. And if it's something that somebody wants agendized, they can say, you know, I understand you can't respond to me here tonight. I want to have a further discussion on this topic. Can we take it to the city and put it on a future agenda? But as it stands right now, it is illegal for me to respond to oral communications because our general public has not been notified of the topic. Is that correct, Tom?
It's improper for you to get into deliberations. You can do a very basic response, but not deliberations.
Thank you.
I would emphasize the last point about putting it on a future agenda. That is also a best practice, is that when something keeps coming up or it's on the public's mind, you often see it come up on an agenda for the next or within a month or so of a future council meeting. So it's not like it doesn't get debated, it just comes up later, depending on the issue and how recently it's been decided, things like that.
Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to clarify so people in the public know we're not ignoring them, but legally we can't speak about anything not on the agenda. Thanks, Tom.
So I recognize you raised your hand again, Paul, but I do have another member of the public who's wishing to speak. So I'm going to move to that member of the public, and then I will return to you to allow you to come back a second time. I saw a hand raised from Michelle Salmon.
Yes, I just want to speak on that particular subject, having spent a lot of time at the podium in front of the Brisbane City Council. There is a very clear difference between oral communications and being allowed to speak in public comment on an item that is on the agenda. And so I think many people get confused because you come up and you have back and forth sometimes when you're giving, when you're speaking on an item that's on the agenda, because it has been agendized, and the council, the mayor has given more leeway to people speaking in that regard. When it comes to public oral communications, no, you don't get a response. Sometimes you get we'll look into it, but no, it's very different. And I think people might confuse that in their minds when they think back over different debates that have happened in the council chambers. So I just really appreciate it. Last meeting, there was a big clock going around that people at home could see, and it was very distracting. And personally, I think 3 minutes is the ideal. Thank you so much. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so Paul, if you'd like to return.
And thank you for having me back up. I thought when you said you weren't going to have any more of what I had to say, I have nothing more to say about what's been said, with one exception. I wasn't asking anybody for any response other than acknowledging what was being asked of you, that I would like you to, amongst yourselves, come up with would you put it on the ballot of us having term limits? I didn't say tonight. Of course, you're going to have to agendize it and spend months talking about it and planning for it. So I'm not up here saying you should be doing this and I need you to respond to me. I'm saying that people come up here and they need to be have a response, as opposed to moving on to the next person. Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your interest. We'll, amongst ourselves, talk about it and bring it up again at another meeting. There's never a fact finding of any of our meetings that we have or anything that's said about anything. So thank you for having me up again.
Thank you. City Clerk, is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak at this time?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so with that, I'll move on to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve items B through E?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Lance,
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
and Mayor Davis.
Aye. We'll now move on to new business. Item F, consider approval of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Brisbane and the San Mateo County Joint Powers Authority concerning the Brisbane History Collection and History Room located in the Brisbane Library. And we have Caroline here this evening to give the staff report.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm here before you with the MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, between the City and the Library Joint Powers Authority concerning the Brisbane History Collection and History Room located in the new Brisbane Library. As you know, since 2018, before the pandemic, the Brisbane Historical Community, which is the ad hoc citizen history committee, met with the City Council subcommittee to talk about projects that it was working on. One of the projects was to develop an MOU between the city and the library system concerning the city's historical documents and the history room in the new library. A number of drafts were developed and reviewed by the city's legal counsel as well as the library's legal counsel, and what's attached is the final proposed MOU as approved by all legal counsels. So essentially, it is laying out the collaborative endeavor to preserve and share the rich history of the Brisbane community, and that the city, the Brisbane Historical Community, and the library JPA will work jointly to determine what will be displayed in the history room. As you know, there's photographs that line the walls, but there's also space for artifacts just outside the history room, and I believe there's shelving that's going to be going in inside the history room itself. Items for display will be rotated through the history room, so it retains a lively and continuously interesting presentation of Brisbane history. For fiscal impact, there's no additional direct cost for entering into this MOU. And as projects arise for using, digitizing, or expanding the city's history collection, the cost will be brought to the City Council according to the city's administrative and budget procedures. This MOU was also reviewed by the city's history subcommittee, which is Mayor Davis and Councilmember Mackin last month over Zoom with the Brisbane Historical Community. With that, I can take any questions, but
Okay, I see Councilmember Mackin with a hand raised, so we'll start there.
Madam Mayor, I'm not sure whether to bring it up. I have questions for the city attorney, but also just would like input on a couple items from my colleagues. So if you'd like for me to wait, I can wait on that.
I think it's okay to get clarification from the city attorney at this time.
Okay. Well, the first item, Madam Mayor, you and I were on subcommittee that reviewed this, and subsequent to that, there were some changes that were recommended, but upon further review, there's a couple other things I would like further review on. On the Memorandum of Understanding, I'm on attachment 1, item number 5, the actual MOU. And there's a reference made to items located in the history room. And I would feel better if that read historical artifacts when located in the library, not just the history room, because I could foresee potential displays in other areas of the library, depending on the occasion. So I would prefer that be more generalized. And I would also like some clarification in that same number that the items are not available for loan to library patrons. There's nothing in this MOU that clarifies that. And I think that that's just something we want to establish for further reference.
Yeah, with respect, Councilmember Mackin, I think this kind of detail probably belongs after when you're actually into council questions. I've made note of both, but if we can hold off, that's all right.
Okay, so I do have one for you then.
Okay.
Under item number 14, 2 members of the history subcommittee from the public history committee are Ray and Anya Miller, had contacted me with something I thought also needed clarification from the city attorney. In this staff report, there was an attachment of the joint powers agreement. And in the very end of the joint powers agreement, under Roman numeral 11, it says execution of this agreement, each party hereby authorizes its respective chief elected official to execute such documents as may be necessary to carry out the terms of this agreement. What may be then in contradiction is the MOU under item number 14 in the very last sentence says the designations will be made by the director of the library JPA and by the city manager of the city. Should those two not agree?
Yeah, it actually should have been the city manager and the head of the library. I noticed that only this afternoon. I apologize, I didn't catch it sooner.
So the rest, if you want to go on, Madam Mayor, to questions, because I had a couple other small items.
Okay, we'll move on to questions. Is there anyone who wishes to start?
I don't have any questions, but I'm glad that we're moving forward.
Yes.
I don't have any questions either, and I'm happy to move forward.
Okay, and Terry?
No questions, just discussion.
Okay, well, we do have a member of the public wishing to speak on this item. So I'll go ahead and call up Paul Buscal.
So it's a couple items. One is the old library. We used to have a display case for people's collections. And that would be nice to have maybe that included at the museum site to have a area where people could bring in. It used to be stay like for a month. The other thing is I have cultural artifacts that have been salvaged from different areas. And I know Mountain Watch has cultural artifacts as well. that could be, if the Native American people were here to help with that part of, if we're going to put that kind of historical stuff in the historical section of the library, that would be really nice to have. And then the only other thing that I thought would be, that I found kind of interesting, is that if I donated things for the museum and they weren't used in the museum, that the city owns them and they would be put into storage. And not sure what would be done with them. So I was wondering if there was a possibility that any donations that weren't used for the museum could be returned, as opposed to being city property and just put into storage somewhere, because that's what it states as far as the plan for things that aren't selected for the museum. Thank you.
I do believe, Paul, that it's a very small space in the history room. So it's my understanding that exhibits are going to rotate. So there will be things that may be on display and that will then return back to storage, but may come back at a later time. I think Caroline's ready to follow up with additional information on that.
Yeah, we on the city's website, there's a section on Brisbane history. It's brisbaneca.org/history. And there's a collection policy page where anyone who has artifacts or historical photographs that they would like to donate or have on display in the history room, they can reach out to the email history@brisbaneca.org, and we can set up an appointment to meet and go over details. But yes, Mayor Davis is right that we would want to rotate through different exhibits and make that known more widely to the community of what's there, so people can come and take a look.
I bet it'll be on a case-by-case basis. There may be things that there's room for it to be on display in the history room for, let's say, 3 months, and it may need to return back to that person's home afterwards. So it sounds like it's just case by case. So do you have any follow-up things to add, Caroline?
That's all, except for in the history room right now, there is a flyer that's on the table, on the conference room table, that has that web URL. If people go in there and they want to learn more and looking at the photographs on the wall, then they have a web URL and a QR code to scan to get to brisbaneca.org/history. And there's digitized collections already available that Caroline Yee, the history project assistant, has worked with San Mateo County Libraries to get digitized and available electronically for free. So it's a really neat collection.
Excellent. Okay, so I will move on then to council discussion, and we'll start with Councilmember Mackin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The other item I would call to your attention is on the MOU, item number 13. And this was brought up at our subcommittee meeting, and it talks about Brisbane's history project may receive financial contributions. And at the time, I believe I brought up that I don't believe, when we talk euphemistically about history project, who is the recipient of financial contributions? It's not really clear whether the recipient designate would be the City of Brisbane, the JPA, or the history group individuals. And I think maybe we need to be more specific there.
Right, that section 13 didn't have that last sentence in the meeting that we had with the subcommittee, which is revenue received for the Brisbane History Project will be received and expended by the City of Brisbane.
Okay, was added. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have. Unless you want me to go back to the one I previously
Yeah, let's return
over on number 5.
Why don't you return to your previous comments?
Okay, so on the MOU number 5, the second sentence talks about artifacts located in the history room. And I would like to be more generic and broad and talk about when located in the library, because I could foresee where there might be exhibits outside of the history room for special occasions. So I'd like that change of wording, just to say these historical artifacts, when located in the library, remain the property of the city and will not be considered part of the library JPA collection. And then potentially to add one more caveat on the end of that, nor are they available for loan to library patrons. And that may seem over the top, but it occurred to me, someone may say, could I borrow that book or publication? Can I check it out of the library? And I think we should just be very specific. Just because items are exhibited, they're not available for loan. That would be permission that would have to come from the city as the owner of the artifacts. And that's all I have.
Okay. Those amendments seem reasonable to me. Cliff, do you have thoughts?
You know, I thought, Colleen, your comments were spot on, so I'm in agreement with that. I don't have any others, though.
Terry?
So on the items that are on display, the library and the city have to agree that it's an appropriate item. Is that the case?
Yes.
And were it to be that the library, let's say, or the city did not feel an item was appropriate for display for whatever reason, and I am looking at things that probably are not going to happen, like inappropriate books that may be in other jurisdictions that people will say, oh, this book is banned from a library, or this thought process is not allowed in our library. I think we're a little more progressive than would warrant that, but is there a way to have an oversight if one group or the other, one entity or the other, didn't feel an item was appropriate? How would we resolve that difference?
I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, Caroline or Colleen, but I believe that the historical committee will put together the exhibits, and that's a multi-member body. So there are, I want to say, like at least 7 or 8 people on that, all different members of the community. So I think that in itself provides some checks and balances. There's also 2 council members, and I believe, it would be going into the library. So my guess is library staff might have a look. So I would think that if there was something that was inappropriate, there would be a discussion among that group that, would make a determination on that. But I do see.
I'm really more concerned with, say, our historical group and council members agree that something is appropriate, and the library says, no.
Why?
How would we resolve that issue? Many times people do not want to acknowledge something that might be in history for whatever reason. And
maybe I could respond to that. The
worried about that.
Yeah. Again, I guess the checks and balance in the system is that the library joint powers agreement board is a public body that is made up of council members from each of the member cities plus the San Mateo County. So there is an elected board that someone could bring a concern to if something like that arose. So I think you have both a route to the city council as well as a route to the JPA board.
So the JPA board itself is the entire board needs to approve Any
No.
items that are in the collection?
No. They're not going to be involved in the day-to-day. That's just going to be between us and the library staff with our history group. But what I'm saying is that if there was an issue that rose to that level and somebody wanted to appeal it, they would have a couple different routes that they could go to get, address their grievances.
Okay, so if our history committee deems a collection or an object that they want to display, it would first go to the librarian and the staff of the library to say yay or nay. And then there's an appeal process that could go further if they felt, oh, this isn't appropriate, or. And is
Yeah,
that written into our MOU, or is that just?
Well,
assumed?
I'm just thinking that's probably the way it would work. I mean, I understand the theoretical concern. I think with our library, I think they're pretty hands off to this. Obviously their issues are more, I think, around the staffing of it, having the access during open hours, things of that nature, as opposed to the content. I think they're pretty much going to leave it up to the local community to figure out what's going to be.
But isn't our MOU written that they do have content approval also?
Well, sure. I mean, we contract with them to operate the library. So anything that happens within the library, they're going to want to have at least some sort of control over it, just in case something got out of whack. But again, I think there's enough kind of internal processes here involved working between the staff of the library, the staff of the city, the history committee, 2 council members on the history committee, and the JPA board, that you have, a lot of checks and balances in the system if there was to be a conflict between parties.
I'm just worried about the whitewashing of history, so to speak, and that we don't run into that issue. So I'll refer it back to legal and staff on the MOU, and if they feel it's reasonable, having the language that's there is reasonable. I just would hate to see that issue come up and not have a remedy for that issue in the MOU. I'd like to see a remedy available in the MOU, not just relying that we're all reasonable and sane people.
Well taken, Madam Councilmember. I would just say that in the MOU, the way I read it, it's the city who's consulting with the library, JPA, and the historical committee. So I took that as the city has the final say, and there would be through normal channels that you're all used to. The document is collaborative. There's a lot of emphasis on collaboration, but we can look back at whether we need to add a sentence about something more specific. But I had read it slightly differently than it sounds like others do.
Thank you.
If I may, Terry, I'm just trying to understand. So you have a concern that perhaps the city would promote something in the historical room, and that the library or the JPA would be against that? And is that the concern?
Not necessarily the library JPA, perhaps a specific librarian or staffer would deem it inappropriate for whatever personal reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And, I am not thinking about our fairly, I won't say liberal, but even-keeled library staff as we see it now. But there are plenty of schools and libraries and other entities around the country right now that are running into problems with basically censorship of things that they don't want to see in schools and in libraries and in public places. And I would hate to see us constrained by that in what we were able, if our group deems something important to history and needing to be visible and vetted, that we wouldn't be able to put that in our library because someone else would deem it offensive or inappropriate. And so that is the safeguard I'd like to see in there. And I'm not saying that we'll ever in California be in that situation. But there's been a lot of situations we would never dream that we would be in that have happened in this country.
All right.
I just want to make sure when we're doing an MOU that we have our bases covered for that.
Okay. Thank you for your clarification.
Okay, I see a hand raised from Councilmember Mackin. Hold on, she's had her hand raised since Terry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a similar concern, but from a different vantage point. So it's interesting that Councilmember O'Connell brought that up. And what I had thought of is, let's say you have a library that has a schedule where they want to celebrate Black History Month or Hispanic History Month or something having to do with the peninsula. And they might want all the exhibits in the library to be coordinated to that theme, and we may not agree. So one thing I might suggest in order to remedy the situation is the wording in number 7, where it says the city in consultation, which sounds like we have to get feedback. I would say the city in concert with the Brisbane History Committee and the Library JPA will decide which materials should be on display and accessible in the history room and establish a rotating schedule. And that would allude to a schedule being established in advance so that there's no last minute, somebody decides they're going to pull the plug, and that in concert, and I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm alluding to all the parties involved sit down, they hammer out a schedule in advance. Could be a schedule for the whole year. As opposed to, well, suddenly at the last minute, we object to what's going to be on display. And I don't know if that remedies it. So just an idea. Thank you.
Does legal think that that amendment would help to clarify any future issues?
I'd like to just take it back and look at it, the wording. I understand the purpose.
So can we not move forward with a motion then this evening, or because of those tweaks? Or can we give the city attorney the authority to amend number 5 and number 7
And 14?
and 14 in a way that reflects council feedback?
Legally, I would say that they're minor enough clarifications that you have the discretion to ask for these and change them. But I would turn to the city manager. One dealing. I don't know what the relationship has been between the parties.
I see a hand raised from Councilmember O'Connell. So
I would just like to say I would not like to stop this from moving forward with the city managers and legal's discretion. I would just like those issues addressed as possible in the best legal way. So I would not like to stop it from moving forward. I'd like to go ahead and vote that we give the staff and legal the opportunity to make amendments where they're able to address these concerns. Would be my hope in this discussion.
is that a motion?
I
I
would make
still
that
have-
motion,
I
yes.
still have comments.
Oh my
I
gosh,
haven't been
I'm so
given
sorry.
comments yet.
I'm so sorry.
Right. So I have two comments. Councilmember Mackin had said that we shouldn't allow patrons to borrow the artifacts. I don't think it should be patrons. I think it should be anybody. So if we're changing that language, that would be my preferred, that, because if, say, Paul Buscal loans some of his items to the library, it should be nobody can borrow them, not just patrons of the library. So that's that one comment. My second comment is I am on the JPA, and this seems so out of the purview of what the JPA does. I don't think in the 7 years I've been on the JPA for the library, anything like this has ever come before the JPA. I think we'd sit there and scratch our heads that, you know, we're looking at programs and processes, not vetting. I understand exactly what Terry is saying about censorship, and it's very unpalatable to me, and I would assume everybody on our board. But I also understand that there's some strange things have happened in California of late, so you never know what might come up. But I don't think this would be something that the JPA would ever be involved in, quite frankly. So if we can just make sure that's there. And I'm the vice chair on the JPA right now, and I've never seen anything like this. I don't think it's our purview at all. So I'm not sure how the JPA gets involved in this MOU. I don't think it would ever come to us. But if there is a concern that it might, and I will say the JPA has brought all the books that have been banned around the country into California libraries as a very specific collection. So that's how the current JPA feels. But obviously, Terry, you know, in the future, that could be radically different, but just so you guys know. Thanks.
Okay, so I have a motion from Councilmember O'Connell. I think that's still aligned with what you said. Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Councilmember Cunningham. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz,
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye, but I did want to ask, did we have any other members of the public that had any comments after our discussion?
I didn't see any hand raised.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great, thank you. And I'm sorry, I am yes on that.
Okay.
And Mayor Davis.
Aye. We'll move on to item G, receive the 2022 annual mandated fire and life safety inspections. And I believe we have Craig Whitner, the Assistant Fire Marshal, Special Services Bureau, here this evening to give us a presentation.
Madam Mayor, Fire Marshal Whitner is unable to attend at this time. We will have to move their item to a future meeting.
Okay. So that brings us to staff reports. We have item H, City Manager's report on upcoming activities.
The first item tonight, we want to thank all the people, volunteers in the community that helped out with the sandbags over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Even though we were now in a dry spell, please hold on to the sandbags if you have them in your side yard or your backyard. You may have a need for them later on in the year. This will prevent the rush to get them again, and the next storm is whenever the next storm is predicted. If you're unable to store them, Public Works will be accepting them at the Public Works Corp Yard out on Tunnel Avenue starting tomorrow. There will be a place that will be designated for them. You'll be able to see when you come out there, but we would prefer that people hold on to them at least through the rainy season. Reminder that Saturday, January 28th is the artist evening of sharing. There will be 14 artists that will be showcased. The event will be at the Mission Blue Center and will start at 7:30 p.m. The Sweetheart Pickleball Mixer is Friday, February 10th at the Mission Blue Tennis Courts from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. A couples event in a round robin format by combined skill levels. A time frame to be finalized depending on the total number of couples registered. Carnations for your favorite sweetheart will be provided. Registration deadline on Friday, February 3rd. And then there is Parents Night Out, which will be on February 11th from 5 to 10 p.m., $25 per child at the BS Modular at 500 San Bruno Avenue. And that is tonight's report.
Thank you. We'll move on to Mayor Council matters. Countywide assignments and subcommittee reports. I believe that O'Connell and Lentz had a meeting.
Yes, we had a Sierra Point Parkway Park and Open Space Subcommittee meeting with the consultant, and they provided 3 concepts, which they labeled them mountain, garden, and ramble. They're just very, very creative. They all have similar features, you know, like dealing with wetlands and sea level rise, and but you know, have a little interesting flavor to them. And so you know, just great feedback from the community to get us to this spot in the process. And so now they're moving on to the next phase, which is the exploration phase, and we're going to be having a pop-up workshop with the community and other means of getting feedback in the near future. So really excited about that.
Great. I don't know if we still have Councilmember O'Connell with us because my screen is now black, but
Yes.
would you like to add on? Okay.
So while I was not able to attend that meeting due to circumstances, I am getting an update from the consultant tomorrow. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that. I did also have a SFO airport technical working group meeting, and that was discussing the GBAS, which is the guided landing system that the airport is trying to install and test, and some innovative flying procedures to help make it less noisy on the arrivals. But of course, because it was a technical working group, there were no decisions made. It was interesting. One of the things when they were announcing it that I took from the meeting was that this new guided landing system was first to be able to reduce delays, increase traffic, and reduce noise. And noise was the last thing on their list. It was more to increase their ability to land more planes and to reduce delays, so to increase productivity and lessen costs to the airline. And as a side note, it was to reduce noise. So an interesting takeaway, but we all know where the airport's coming from and where it's going to need to go for the future. So that's about all I can add from that meeting. And those are the only meetings I have.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to report out on?
You know, I would like to just make an announcement, Madison.
Yeah.
I'm coordinating with the library to do office hours. So I decided to, you know, bring that back now that COVID's not as intense, you know, as it once was. And so, yeah, haven't worked out the final details, but trying to do it once a month, perhaps in the community room. And as soon as we get the details, then put that information out to the public.
Great, thanks. Okay,
Ma-
I have been notified that item G might be coming back sooner than expected.
Fire Marshal Whitner is no longer experiencing technical difficulties. He is now online in Zoom.
Okay.
Fire Marshal Whitner, can you do your staff report, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Honorable Madam Mayor, Honorable City Council, thank you very much for receiving our report this evening. I apologize, I don't have anything to read other than my apologies for my technical difficulties. I always said I was technologically challenged, and it's certainly showing itself tonight. I will say that the North County Fire Authority is very proud to provide the fire protection and inspection services for the City of Brisbane. We work very hard to make sure that our citizens are fire safe, and we're proud to serve the City of Brisbane. But thank you very much for your patience in receiving it this evening.
Do we have any council questions?
I do not.
I do not.
Seems like no one. I do have a member of the public wishing to speak on this item, Paul Buscal.
Thank you. I noticed that some of your duties include the facilities on properties and private property. And I'm curious if dead, dangerous, and dying trees are part of your inspections, and how can we alleviate the issue with private properties, trees impacting the public right-of-ways and private properties and infrastructure?
Yes, sir. So North County Fire Authority, we do receive complaints of various nature of all types, including trees and potentially hazardous trees. If you would be so kind as to contact our offices, we will certainly look into it. And as far as the matter of private property, we don't always have the expertise to determine if a tree is diseased or not, but we can work hand in hand with a local arborist and also with the city building department and code enforcement, and educate the public on their responsibility if it's in fact their trees. But if you would be so kind as to contact our offices, we'll be more than happy to look into it.
We have a follow-up question.
I'm sorry, I'll be brief. So I wasn't speaking about any trees in particular that I'm concerned with, but it's the whole town. And I'm wondering if we can reevaluate these trees on properties that are going to impact private or public right-of-ways, and work out some kind of grant for funding to help remove these trees or reduce these trees for the threat of also fire, but impacting on falling. And a lot of these trees were allowed to grow as big as they are because back in the day, the permitting process to remove the tree was a challenge. And so people didn't cut down trees when they had an opportunity. Now these trees are massive. So if we could work out something citywide, not a case-by-case basis, something where you actually incorporate that into your inspections when you go look at properties and say, well, wait a second, we need to look at these trees and do something about it. So maybe we can get some grants to help remove or help with this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay.
Yes, sir. May I respond?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, sir. I would let you know that the North County Fire Authority is currently looking at a couple grants and applying for grants. And I will say annually, grants for fuels reduction is something that fire authorities throughout the state do look at. And that is, I can guarantee you that is one of the many subjects that your local fire protection agency, NCFA, looks at on an annual basis. Not just individual trees, but fuels of all types throughout the community. And sir, I would only say with regard to trees, a healthy tree, a standalone tree, we look at those as well, but also the fuels that would impact the ability of fire to get up into the tree. So just be aware that be certain that your local fire authority does look at those in conjunction with other fuels throughout the community.
Thank you. I'll open it up to council discussion, or I'll entertain a motion at this time. If anyone would like to make one.
And I'll make a motion to that the city council acknowledge that North County Fire has completed required annual mandated fire and safety inspections within the city of Brisbane for 2022.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. City clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
And Mayor Davis.
Aye. Okay, now we're moving on to written communications. Hey clerk, did the council receive any written communications?
There were none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, that brings us to oral communications number 2. Is there anyone else wishing to speak at this time? Paul Buscal?
So I wanted to thank all the first responders and members of the public and everybody that came out and everything that the city had written about the events that we had. And that was a scary situation for a lot of reasons. And, you know, it was great that we have dedicated members of this community in our staff that public works, especially that have institutional knowledge to be able to get a good handle on it and bringing in resources and stuff to help us was a big deal. One of the things that I wanted to just mention really quick was that I'm really concerned about our seniors in Brisbane, and there's a lot of lonely seniors in this town that are kind of left to their own devices. And that woman, Ernie, in particular, that I'm very grateful for the City of Brisbane Officer Malone in particular, that when I approached him and told him there was a serious situation with that woman, Ernie, curling, he went right up there and handled it. We shouldn't be going up there and having to handle older senior members of this community when they're in dire situations that were really deplorable. So I wanted just to say that. And when you guys are at your subcommittee meetings or at the county meetings, you know, we need to get a sustainable, something that's not a budgetary item to help feed our seniors and make sure they're being checked on. So thanks.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to speak at this time?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 8:38.
Thank you.